What I overheard that evening made me realize I had to protect my grandson from the most dangerous person he'd ever worked with. This man thought I was just another uneducated old janitor who couldn't understand a word he said. He smiled to our faces while destroying my boy's future in a language he assumed none of us knew. But I understood every single word. Let me back up a bit. My name is Robert Morrison, and I'm 65 years old. Most folks in our Toronto neighborhood know me as the friendly old guy who used to clean floors at the elementary school down on Danforth Avenue. I retired 3 years ago after 30 years of pushing a mop, emptying trash bins, and keeping those hallways spotless. It's honest work, and I've never been ashamed of it. But what people don't know, what I rarely talk about, is what I did before that. From 1978 to 1993, I served in the Canadian Forces as a military translator. I spent years in Quebec, then overseas in France, Belgium, and parts of Africa. I can speak French like a Parisian, understand Quebecois slang better than most Montrealers, and pick up on the subtle differences between European and Canadian French that most people miss. When I left the service, I wanted a quiet life. My wife, Sarah, had just been diagnosed with MS, and I needed steady work with predictable hours. Janitorial work gave me that. It gave me time with her before she passed 8 years ago. God rest her soul. My grandson, James, is 28 now, and he's everything his grandmother and I prayed he'd become. Smart as a whip, got his engineering degree from U of T, University of Toronto. Works at one of those big tech firms in the financial district, the kind of place with glass walls, fancy coffee machines, and people who wear sneakers that cost more than my monthly rent. James has been there for 4 years, working his way up, putting in the hours, earning respect. He's a good kid, always has been. About 6 months ago, their company got a new director of operations, fellow by the name of Philippe Marchand, transferred from the Montreal office. James came home to my little apartment in Scarborough that first week, excited as I'd ever seen him. "Grandpa," he said, "this guy is supposed to be brilliant. Harvard MBA, turned around 3 divisions, speaks 4 languages. If I can impress him, I could make senior engineer by next year." I was happy for James. Truly, I was. But something about the way he described this Marchand character set off a little alarm in the back of my mind. Not enough to say anything, just enough to pay attention. Call it intuition. Call it an old man's paranoia. Call it whatever you want. I've learned in my years that when your gut whispers, you listen. 2 months after Marchand arrived, James came home deflated. "He keeps passing me over," he told me, sitting at my kitchen table like he used to do as a boy when something was bothering him. I pitched this whole system redesign, worked on it for months. Brilliant stuff, Grandpa. Could save the company millions. Marchand said he'd think about it. Then, a week later, there's this new guy from Montreal presenting almost the exact same idea. I mean, it's my idea, but with just enough changes that I can't prove anything. I made us both tea, the way Sarah used to make it, strong and sweet. "Did you document everything?" I asked. "Keep copies of your emails, your proposals." "Of course," James said. "But Grandpa, this guy is smooth. He's got the executives eating out of his hand. Perfect smile, perfect handshake, says all the right things. Nobody would believe he's stealing ideas from a junior engineer." I patted his shoulder. "Keep your head down, do good work, and document everything. The truth has a way of coming out, son." But I'll admit, I was worried. This Marchand fellow sounded like the type who'd step on anyone to get ahead, the type who saw people like James as rungs on a ladder. I started praying about it nightly. "Lord," I'd say, looking at Sarah's picture on my nightstand. "I don't know what's going on, but if my boy's in trouble, please show me how to help him." 3 weeks later, James called me with an invitation that surprised me. "Hey, Grandpa, Marchand wants to meet the family. Says he likes to know his team members personally, build relationships outside work. He suggested dinner this Saturday. Would you come? I know it's not your usual scene, but it would mean a lot to me." My usual scene? James was being polite. What he meant was that fancy restaurants in Yorkville weren't where old janitors like me typically spent their Saturday evenings. But this was my grandson asking, and I'd walk through fire for that kid. "Of course I'll come," I told him. "What's the dress code?" "Smart casual," James said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Just, a nice shirt and pants. Nothing too formal." I had one good outfit left from my military days, kept it pressed and ready for funerals and the occasional wedding. That would have to do. The restaurant James named was one of those places where you need a reservation 6 weeks in advance, and the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. But Philippe Marchand was paying, James assured me, as a team-building exercise. Saturday arrived, cold and clear, proper November weather for Toronto. I took the subway down, watching the city roll past, thinking about how much it had changed since Sarah and I first moved here in '75. The restaurant was on Avenue Road, all modern glass and minimalist design. I felt out of place the moment I walked through the door, but the hostess smiled warmly at me anyway. Canadians are polite like that, even in fancy places. James was already there with his girlfriend Amy, a sweet girl who works in marketing. They waved me over to a table where a man I immediately recognized from James's descriptions was holding court. Philippe Marchand was exactly as I'd pictured him. Mid-40s, athletic build, expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, perfectly styled hair with just the right amount of gray at the temples. The kind of man who'd practiced his handshake and his smile until both were weapons of charm. "You must be Robert," he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, confident, calculated. "James has told me so much about you. Please sit. Sit. I've already ordered some wine. Hope that's all right." His English was perfect. Barely a trace of accent, just enough French inflection to make him sound sophisticated rather than foreign. We made small talk for the first 15 minutes. He asked about my retirement, my time as a janitor, with that practiced interest that important people use when talking to those they consider beneath them. I recognized it. I'd seen it 1,000 times in the military. Officers who'd nod along while enlisted men spoke, their eyes already looking past you to someone more useful. But I played along. "Oh, it was good work," I said, keeping my voice modest. "Kept me busy, paid the bills. Nothing glamorous but honest." "Honest work is noble work," Philippe said, raising his wine glass. "We need people willing to do the jobs others won't." There it was, that subtle edge, the implication that my work was something others wouldn't deign to do. James didn't catch it, too nervous about making a good impression. Amy might have, but she was young and didn't want to cause waves, but I heard it loud and clear. The server came to take our orders. Philippe ordered in rapid French, then caught himself with an apologetic laugh. "Sorry, force of habit. I grew up in Quebec City, and sometimes when I see French on the menu, my brain just switches over. You know how it is." "No worries," James said quickly. "I took French in school, but I'm terrible at it. Can barely order a coffee in Montreal without messing it up." Phipe smiled that perfect smile. "Well, we can't all be good at languages. Some of us are better with numbers and computers. Eh, James?" It was said warmly, but there was something underneath, a categorization. You're the tech guy. Know your place. Stay in your lane. The dinner continued pleasantly enough on the surface. Philippe told stories about Harvard, about his time turning around struggling divisions, about the Montreal office, and how different it was from Toronto. Montreal has culture, he said at one point. Real European sensibility. Toronto is very business-focused, very English. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Different strengths. Again, that subtle put-down, wrapped in politeness. James and Amy laughed along, not quite seeing it. Or maybe they did see it, but felt they couldn't say anything. That's how people like Phipe operate. They make you complicit in your own diminishment. Then Philip's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, said, "Excuse me for one moment," and stepped away from the table toward the restaurant's entrance area, where it was quieter. I thought nothing of it. Important man. Important call. Saturday night? Be damned. But then I heard him speak, and my entire body went still. He was standing about 20 feet away near the coat check, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Quebecois French, the kind of French you hear in Montreal bars in working-class neighborhoods, full of slang and colloquialisms that they don't teach in school. And every word came through crystal clear to my old military-trained ears. "We Mark," he was saying. "Yes, Mark. I'm with the little genius now, and his grandfather." The tone was dripping with sarcasm. Educated? The old man was a janitor his whole life. No education, no class. It's pathetic. My hands resting on the table didn't move. 40 years of military training taught me to control my reactions, to show nothing on my face, while my mind processed information. James and Amy were talking about something, oblivious, and I let them continue while I listened. "La proposale de James," Philippe continued. "C'est des classes. I've already transferred all his files to Xavier. By Monday, the presentation will be Xavier's, not James's. These English Toronto kids, they're so trusting, so naive. They actually think hard work matters. They don't understand politics." He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound made my blood run cold. This wasn't just office politics. This was calculated destruction of my grandson's career by a man who saw him as nothing more than a resource to mine for ideas. "He's a blonde," Philip went on. "Basic, très basic. Probably from Montreal on. They're all the same, these Toronto couples. No sophistication, no culture. They think going to the CN Tower is worldly." And his girlfriend? Basic, very basic. Probably from a boring suburb. He paused, listening to whoever Mark was. Then, "Demain? I'm meeting with the VP to discuss concerns about James's performance. No, I'll stay another hour, pretend to be nice, then I'll leave. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the VP to discuss concerns about James's performance. He doesn't even know what's coming." Trust me, Mark. James Morrison? Either I push him out, or I push him down so far he's no threat. And that's one less English boy thinking he deserves promotions in my division. In 6 months, James Morrison won't be a problem anymore. Phipe laughed again, made some crude joke in French about Toronto that I won't repeat, then said his goodbyes and headed back to our table, his face rearranging itself into that warm, professional smile, like an actor stepping back on stage. "Sorry about that," he said, sitting down smoothly. "Montreal office, you know, can't seem to leave me alone even on weekends." "No problem," James said. I watched my grandson's face, so trusting, so hopeful, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Protective rage, the kind that makes old men do young men's things. But I kept my expression neutral, kept my voice steady. "Phipe," I said carefully. "That was quite a conversation. Sounded intense." He waved a hand dismissively. "Just some logistics. Nothing that can't wait until Monday." Then he turned to James. "So, James, I wanted to talk to you about that system redesign you pitched. I've been giving it some thought." I watched him lie to my grandson's face, watched him smile and nod, and pretend to take James's ideas seriously, when I just heard him on the phone admitting he'd already stolen everything and was preparing to sabotage my boy's career. It took every ounce of discipline I had to sit there quietly, to let the dinner continue, to smile politely when Philippe made jokes, and to nod when he offered career advice to James. But inside, I was planning, I was thinking, and I was praying. "Lord," I thought, "you put me here tonight for a reason. You gave me these skills for a reason. I don't know what you want me to do yet, but I'm listening." The dinner wrapped up around 10 o'clock. Philippe picked up the check with a flourish, insisted it was his pleasure, told James he'd see him Monday morning. "We should do this more often," he said, shaking my hand again. "It's so important to know the people behind our team members. Family matters, Robert." "It really does." I smiled. "It certainly does, Phipe. Family matters more than anything." We parted ways outside the restaurant. James and Amy headed to his car, talking excitedly about the dinner. "I think it went well," James was saying. "Did you see how interested he was in my ideas?" I told them I was going to walk for a bit before taking the subway. Needed to clear my head. James offered to drive me home, but I waved him off. "I'm 65, not 95. I can handle the subway." The truth was, I needed time to think. I walked down Avenue Road toward Bloor Street, the November wind cutting through my jacket, my mind racing. I'd been in intelligent situations before, back in my military days. I knew the importance of evidence, of documentation, of having your facts straight before making accusations. What I'd heard Philippe say was damning, but it was my word against his. An old janitor against a Harvard MBA with a perfect track record and the executive's trust. By the time I got home to my apartment, it was nearly midnight. I sat in my living room, Sarah's picture looking at me from the mantel, and I did what I always do when I'm truly stuck. I prayed, not a quick prayer, but a real one. The kind where you pour out your heart and wait for clarity. "Sarah," I said to her picture, "I wish you were here. You always knew what to do." Then I closed my eyes and prayed properly. "Lord, I need wisdom here. That man is going to destroy James's career. He's a snake, but I can't just accuse him without proof. What do I do?" I sat there in the quiet, and slowly an idea began to form. Not my idea. I believe God's idea. It was risky, maybe a bit crazy for a 65-year-old man, but it might work. I'd need to move quickly, and I'd need to be smart about it. But if I could pull it off, I could save my grandson and expose Philippe Marchand for exactly what he was. Monday morning, I called James. "Hey, bud, you know how you said your office is always looking for extra cleaning staff for special events?" James sounded surprised. Yeah, Grandpa. We've got a big investor presentation Thursday. They usually hire a crew to make sure everything's spotless. Why? You think you could get me on that crew?" "I'm bored in retirement. Could use some extra cash, and it'd be fun to see where you work." There was a pause. "Grandpa, you don't need to work anymore. You've earned your rest." "I want to," I said firmly. "Humor an old man. Plus, your grandmother always said, 'Idle hands are the devil's workshop.' Get me on that crew." James hesitated, but he's a good kid. He called me back an hour later. "Okay, you're on the list. But Grandpa, it's just cleaning. Don't overdo it, and if your back hurts, you stop immediately." "I'll be fine," I assured him. "What time should I be there?" The next 3 days, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prepared like I was back in the forces. I reviewed everything I knew about corporate espionage, about gathering evidence, about building a case. I called an old buddy from my military days, Frank Chen, who'd gone into corporate security after retiring. "Frank," I said, "if you needed to record a conversation at an office building, what would you use?" Frank asked no questions. Bless him. Just told me about a small recording device I could buy at any electronics store, legal in Ontario, as long as I was party to the conversation or had reasonable belief a crime was being discussed. "But Robert," he warned, "be careful. This isn't the military anymore. Civilians play by different rules." "I know," I said, "but sometimes the right thing requires risks." Thursday morning, I showed up at James's office building at 6 a.m., wearing my old janitor's uniform that I'd kept in the back of my closet. The head of the cleaning crew, a nice woman named Maria, didn't give me a second glance, just handed me a cart, told me to focus on the executive floor and make sure all the conference rooms were perfect. I worked slowly, methodically, watching and listening. The office was mostly empty, just a few early arrivals. James came in around 7, saw me in the hallway, and grinned. "Hey, Grandpa, how's it going?" "Just like old times," I told him honestly. And it was. There's a rhythm to cleaning, a meditation in the work. But today, I had a different purpose. Around 8:30, I heard Philip's voice. He was in his office, door half open, on another phone call, speaking French again. I pushed my cart closer, cleaning the hallway just outside, looking like just another invisible janitor doing his job. "We stand," Philip was saying. "Yes, it's today. La présentation toute rapide to James Presente. The VP will be so impressed, and James will look like he's been coasting." Xavier's presentation, all of James's work, but Xavier will present it. I kept cleaning, my hand steady, even though my heart was pounding. The recording device in my shirt pocket was getting every word. "James," Philip continued. "I'm meeting with him at 9 o'clock. I'm going to tell him his performance has been concerning. Lay the groundwork. Dan's on Moon. I'll have enough documentation to push him out," says Anglais de Toronto. They never see it coming. That was it. The admission I needed. I finished cleaning the hallway and moved on, my mind already working on the next steps. I had the recording. I had proof, but I needed to be smart about how I used it. At 8:45, I saw James heading toward Philip's office, looking nervous. I quickly intercepted him. "James, can I talk to you for just 1 minute?" He looked stressed. "Grandpa, I've got a meeting with Marchand in 5 minutes. Can it wait?" "No," I said firmly. "It can't. Come with me." I led him to an empty conference room, closed the door, and pulled out my phone, where I'd transferred the recording. "I need you to listen to something. Don't interrupt. Just listen." I played him Philip's phone calls from Saturday night. Watched my grandson's face go from confused to shocked, to devastated, to angry. When I played this morning's recording, James's hands clenched into fists. "That son of a," he started. "Language," I said automatically, then almost laughed at myself. "Sorry, old habit. But yes, that's who you've been working for." "How did you?" James stared at me. "Grandpa, how do you speak French? I've never heard you say a single word in French my entire life." "Long story," I said. "I'll tell you everything later. Right now, we need to make a plan. You've got HR in this building?" "Yeah, but Grandpa, it's his word against ours. He'll just deny everything." I held up my phone. "Not with this. In Ontario, I can legally record conversations if I'm present, or if I believe a crime is being committed. What he's doing? Stealing your intellectual property? Planning to sabotage your career? That's fraud. That's wrongful dismissal in the making. This recording is admissible." James looked at me like he'd never seen me before. "Who are you? And what have you done with my grandfather?" I smiled. "I'm the same guy who pushed a mop for 30 years. Just used to do other things before that. Now, does your company have a VP of ethics or legal department?" 30 minutes later, James and I were sitting in the office of Margaret Chen, Vice President of Ethics and Compliance. She'd been skeptical when James requested an emergency meeting, but when I played her the recordings, her expression turned to stone. "Mr. Morrison," she said to me, "these recordings are explosive. You understand the implications?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I understand that Mr. Marchand has been defrauding this company, stealing employee intellectual property, and engaging in discriminatory practices based on language and region of origin. I also understand that if you don't act on this, I'll be taking these recordings to the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and whatever media outlet will listen." James's eyes went wide. I'd never spoken to anyone in authority like that before, at least not in front of him. But Margaret Chen just smiled slightly. "That won't be necessary," she said. "Give me 2 hours." Those 2 hours felt like 2 years. James and I sat in a coffee shop across the street, both too wired to actually drink our coffees. "Grandpa," James kept saying, "I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you speak French. I can't believe any of this. Your grandmother and we didn't talk much about the old days," I told him. "Seemed like bragging, you know. But I wasn't always a janitor, James. I did my part, served my country, and I'd do a lot more than this to protect you." At 11 a.m., Margaret Chen called James's cell. "Please come back to the office, both of you." When we arrived, there was a security guard waiting in the lobby. He escorted us not to Margaret's office, but to the main boardroom. Inside were Margaret, the CEO, the head of HR, and legal counsel. Philippe Marchand was there too, sitting alone on one side of the table, his perfect composure cracked, his face pale. The CEO, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Wong, gestured for us to sit. Mr. Morrison," she said, addressing both of us. "We've reviewed the recordings and conducted some preliminary investigations. We've also spoken with Xavier Laurent, who confirmed that Mr. Marchand provided him with files from James's computer and directed him to present them as his own work." Phipe started to speak, but Patricia held up a hand. "We've heard enough from you, Phipe. Right now, I want to hear from Robert Morrison." "Sir, you mentioned you were in the Canadian Forces. Can you elaborate on that?" I told them about my 15 years as a military translator, my fluency in French, my work in intelligence. Told them I'd retired and become a janitor because I needed steady hours to care for my dying wife. Told them I'd loved that work, found dignity in it. But that didn't mean I'd forgotten my training. When I finished, Patricia turned to Phipe. "You thought you could mock this man, mock his family, mock their language and background, all while committing fraud against this company. You thought a janitor couldn't possibly understand you, couldn't possibly be a threat. That was a very, very expensive mistake." Philippe tried one last play. "This recording, it's entrapment. It's legal?" The legal counsel cut him off. "It's damning. We have you on tape admitting to theft of intellectual property, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violations of our workplace discrimination policies. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to clear your personal items." I watched Philippe Marchand, this man who'd smiled at my grandson while planning his destruction, who'd called me pathetic and uneducated, who'd assumed his Harvard pedigree made him untouchable, being escorted out by security. He didn't look at me as he left. Couldn't, I suppose. Patricia turned to James. Mr. Morrison, on behalf of this company, I apologize. Your work on the system redesign was excellent, and it will be properly credited to you. We'd like to move forward with implementation, with you leading the project. We're also promoting you to senior engineer effective immediately, with a salary adjustment to match. James looked stunned. I thank you. I don't know what to say. Thank your grandfather, Patricia said with a small smile. He's quite something. Mr. Morrison, she said to me, I don't suppose you'd consider coming out of retirement. We could use someone with your skill set in our security division. I laughed. No, ma'am. I'm happy being retired, but I appreciate the offer. As James and I left the building that afternoon, he kept shaking his head. I can't believe this. Any of this. You're like a secret agent or something. I was a translator, I corrected. Big difference. But yeah, I had some interesting days back then. Why didn't you ever tell me? I stopped walking, turned to face my grandson. Because it wasn't important, James. What was important was being there for you and your grandmother, making sure bills got paid, showing up to your hockey games, teaching you to be a good man. The rest was just what I did for work. James hugged me then. Right there on King Street, people walking past us in the business district. Thank you, Grandpa. You saved my career. Maybe my whole life. That's what family does, I said simply. We protect each other. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea, looking at Sarah's picture. We did good today, love, I told her. Our boy is going to be okay. I thought about Philip Marchand, about his assumptions, his arrogance. He'd looked at an old janitor and seen nothing worth his respect. He'd assumed education and job titles were the measure of a person. He'd forgotten that everyone has a story, everyone has skills, everyone has value, and he'd paid dearly for that mistake. The story spread through James's company quickly. By the next week, I'd gotten calls from 2 reporters wanting to write human interest pieces about the janitor who spoke 7 languages and took down a corrupt executive. I declined politely. This wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about protecting my family. But I did agree to one thing. James's company asked if I'd come speak at their diversity and inclusion workshop. They wanted me to talk about assumptions, about respect, about not judging people by their current circumstances. I wasn't comfortable being in front of crowds, but it seemed like something Sarah would have wanted me to do, something that might help people. So, I stood up in front of a room of young professionals and told them my story. Told them about learning languages in the military, about choosing janitorial work for love of my wife, about overhearing Phipe's phone calls, but mostly I talked about respect. Here's what I've learned in 65 years, I told them. Every person you meet knows something you don't. Every job has dignity. The person cleaning your office might speak 5 languages. The person serving your coffee might have a PhD. The quiet person in the corner might be the smartest one in the room. Treat everyone with respect, not because of what they can do for you, but because they're human beings with their own stories, their own struggles, their own worth. I paused, thinking about how to say the next part. Philippe Marchand made a lot of mistakes. He stole. He lied. He schemed. But his biggest mistake was thinking people's value could be measured by their job title, or their accent, or which part of the country they came from. He forgot that we're all just people trying to do our best, and that underestimating someone based on surface appearances is not just wrong, it's dangerous. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping, and soon the whole room was on their feet. I felt embarrassed by the attention, but also grateful. If my story could help even one person think twice before dismissing someone, it was worth the discomfort. 3 months later, James got another promotion. His system redesign saved the company $12 million in the first year alone. He's thriving now, more confident, more aware of office politics, but not cynical about them. He still comes by my apartment every Sunday for dinner, brings Amy with him. They're talking about getting married next summer. As for me, I'm back to my quiet retirement. I read my books, watch hockey, volunteer at the community center. Sometimes I'll speak a bit of French with the Quebecois families in my building, and they're always surprised. "Mais Robert France Espar," they ask. "How did we not know you spoke French?" "Didn't seem important to mention," I always say. And it's true. Languages are just tools. What matters is how you use them, who you protect with them, what good you can do. Sometimes I think about that night at the restaurant, hearing Philippe Marchand mock my grandson and me, planning his schemes, so confident in his superiority. I think about the look on his face in that boardroom when he realized the pathetic old janitor had been 3 steps ahead of him the whole time. There's no pleasure in another man's downfall, but there's deep satisfaction in protecting those you love. I keep Sarah's picture on my nightstand, and every night before bed, I tell her about my day. "We raised a good boy," I tell her. "He's going to be okay. Better than fine." And I'm doing okay too, love. Still missing you every day, but doing okay. The neighborhood knows me as Robert Morrison, retired janitor, quiet guy who keeps to himself. And that's fine. I don't need them to know about the languages, or the military service, or the corporate takedown. That's not who I am. I'm just a grandfather who loves his grandson, a widower who still loves his wife, and a man who believes in treating people with dignity and respect. But if someone ever threatens my family again, if some arrogant fool thinks they can hurt the people I love because they've underestimated this old man, well, let's just say I've still got a few tricks left. Not many people know this, but I also speak Russian, Mandarin, and enough Arabic to get by. Learned them all in the service. Kept them sharp all these years, reading books from the library. You never know when languages might come in handy. You never know when God might put you in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, with exactly the right skills, to do exactly what needs doing. And that's the real lesson here, I think. Not that you should learn languages to catch bad guys, though that's a nice bonus, but that every skill you have, every experience you've had, every difficult season you've walked through, it all matters. It all has purpose. Sometimes that purpose doesn't reveal itself for years, even decades. But when it does, you'll be grateful you paid attention. You learned. You grew. You didn't give up. I'm 65 years old. I spent 15 years in the military and 30 years pushing a mop. And you know what? Both careers taught me valuable things. Both mattered. Both made me who I am. The military taught me discipline, languages, strategy. Janitorial work taught me patience, humility, the dignity of honest labor, and how to be invisible when necessary. All of it prepared me for that one Thursday morning when my grandson needed me to be more than just a grandfather, needed me to be a protector, an advocate, a man who could stand up to corporate bullies and win. God has a funny way of preparing you for battles you don't even know are coming. And if there's anything I want young people to take from my story, it's this. Pay attention. Learn everything you can. Respect everyone you meet. Stay humble. Work hard. And when the moment comes, when someone you love needs you to step up, you'll find that all those years of preparation, all those skills you thought maybe didn't matter anymore, all those experiences, good and bad, they'll be exactly what you need. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume you know someone's full story. And never ever mistake kindness for weakness or humility for ignorance. Because that old man cleaning your floors, that quiet woman in accounting, that unassuming person you barely notice, they might just be the most dangerous person you'll ever dismiss. Philip Marchand learned that lesson the hard way. I hope others can learn it the easy way, by choosing respect, choosing humility, choosing to see the humanity in everyone they meet. That's my story. That's what happened. And if you ask me if I'd do it all again, the answer is simple. In a heartbeat, for family, for justice, for what's right, I'd do it all again. And twice on Sundays. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got hockey to watch, and a grandson coming by for dinner. Life is good. God is faithful. And this old janitor is exactly where he's supposed to be.